Position for the first time in 7 rounds of the Australian Touring Car Championship is George Fury in his turbo Nissan. Yesterday, in failing light, Fury recorded a time of 1:15.2, 2.2 seconds under the existing lap record. Beside him is Alan Moffat in the Mazda RX-7. Moffat with a time of 1:15.7, and it is only the second time in the Touring Car Championship that these two cars will drag from the front row of the grid. On third position on the second row, Peter Brock in the Holden Commodore. Brock did his 1:16.1 in the first session of practice yesterday. Beside him, Alan Grice in the second Commodore, a 1:16.4, and Grice is so annoyed that the second session of practice yesterday was held short. Then comes the cat amongst the pigeons. Local driver Terry Shield in a Mazda, having his first drive in an Australian Touring Car Championship, a 1:16.7. The first Ford, Dick Johnson, the current Australian Touring Car Champion, battling with a poorly handling Ford Falcon, 1:17.1, still underneath his lap record. 32 laps of the Oran Park Grand Prix circuit, 83.84 kilometres, and the largest crowd we've seen at Oran Park in years, probably since the clash in the Australian Touring Car Championship in 1972 between Alan Moffat and Bob Jane. The flag is out. George Fury has altered his suspension just for the start, and he dumps it. George Fury blows the start, and Alan Moffat takes it away. Peter Brock on the outside.
They're using the Grand Prix course so the cars go down beyond the shortened section of the track. Moffat slips through into second place, Grice to third, Fury, then Johnson. Peter McLeod also doing well, and we can see there Greg Hansford moving up through the field in car number 31. Under the bridge, and it's Brock, Moffat, Grice, then Fury, Jones alongside Dick Johnson, Peter McLeod and Steve Harrington also moving up there through the right-hander.
Brock, as he's done in the last 2 rounds of the Australian Touring Car Championship, taking the lead and then trying to extend his lead right from the start. Oh, and Johnson hits the fence. The poorly handling Ford Falcon, and Dick Johnson, the reigning Australian Touring Car Champion, hasn't even done 1 lap. Here it comes again. Just lets it go too wide, and he will have, and bounces in on the front wheel as well, and then runs along the fence on his front wheel, and that has cost Dick Johnson serious suspension damage, and he'll be out of the event. Alan Moffat in second position, Alan Grice in third, George Fury.
Moffat closes under brakes as they come through BP corner and up at the end of lap number 1 out of a total of 32 on the Grand Prix course. Those two drivers having opened up quite a gap now over Alan Grice in the second of the Commodores. Look at Moffat under brakes in a car that weighs some 1,000 odd kilograms. The lightest touring car in the race, has a dab at the brakes once again as he goes through the left-hander and tucks right in behind Peter Brock.
Barry Jones in the red Mazda out wide as he chases George Fury.
Brock, who got away to a terrible start in the Touring Car Championship. The car had gearbox problems at Calder. Ran second in an ill-handling car at Sandown. Didn't finish at Symmons Plains. And then he started to come good. He was flying at Wanneroo when he backed off the circuit into the sand. Did so well at Adelaide to hold out Alan Moffat.
A 1:21.6 opening lap. That's only 4 seconds under the outright lap record. Or over the outright lap record, rather. And now as Alan Moffat moves up onto the tail of Peter Brock, and Brock using all the track and then some. The point score situation in the Australian Touring Car Championship has ceased to be theoretical. Alan Moffat needs to win this race. A 1:16.09 for Brock. That is 1.2 seconds, 1.3 seconds under the lap record of Dick Johnson, and it's been done on full tanks.
These two drivers were locked in battle here last year at the round of the Touring Car Championship, which at that time was round 4 in March, in a race where conditions were continually changing with rain falling on the circuit, and the two of them had a real sparring duel, knocking a few panels in and a few corners of the car. And it was Moffat, in fact, who jumped the start and was penalised a minute after crossing the line first. Peter Brock being the eventual winner. And it's Moffat now who's giving Peter Brock a real headache.
Moffat not being gentle on his car either. Johnson is crawling back to the pits, we learn, coming up to the pit road now, but he's obviously out of the event. There he is there as he Brock and Moffat charge past. Oh, it's car for Stephen Harrington. He's got a flat tyre and he's going to try and limp to the pits with the flat tyre. He's got half the Grand Prix circuit yet to go. 1:16.7 on lap 3 to Peter Brock, still under Dick Johnson's lap record, and that will be the pace of the race. Barry Jones desperate to get through George Fury in 4th position. That's Alan Grice, George Fury and Barry Jones right behind him. Then comes Peter McLeod in the Slick 50, running on number 59, Mazda RX-7.
Moffat again using all of the track and getting up on the rookie strips and tossing the Mazda around behind Brock's Commodore. 5-speed gearbox in the Mazda, 4-speed in the Commodore. BP corner and under brakes. Big plunge down there and a little hard to see just how tough it is to come out of that corner as they drift the cars out wide. There's Grice now with plenty of pressure from Fury, Jones, Peter McLeod in the Slick 50 Mazda. Johnson has restarted his XE Falcon and is now crawling along the main straight. How disappointing for Dick, the man who really didn't want to come to Oran Park anyway. Very disappointed in the way that the car's handling. Tried so many different suspension settings. It's Fury now who's got plenty of pressure from Jones, who seems to be getting through this part of the course very well. He ducks and he weaves and he looks for a way through. Of course, Jones was the man who partnered Alan Jones in last year's CRC 300. The only occasion that Alan Jones has really come to the fore in Australian touring car racing since his return from Formula One.
And the gap back between these two, Peter Brock and Alan Moffat, back to Alan Grice, is 3.57 seconds.
Moffat getting all over Brock once again, gets right out onto the concrete on that occasion. It's a classic confrontation between the two drivers that have kept Australian touring car racing alive for some 10 years in Australia. Both of them with overseas experience. Brock has raced at Spa in a Vauxhall Magnum. Moffat, of course, has been to Daytona, to Sebring, to Le Mans. Brock's been there as well on 2 occasions, once in a BMW, once in a Porsche for Alan Hamilton. As they go under brakes at the end and now line up for the run under the bridge. Brock just drops the right-hand rear off into the dirt. Moffat gets a little bit closer. Now he gets an opportunity to side by side, but there's not too much room there as they settle back down to the racing line for this very tight right-hander, possibly the slowest corner of the circuit.
He can take such a more economical line through that slow corner, using all the G-forces that this little Mazda can muster, and any time it seems he can just steer in tighter and use less of the track than Peter Brock and still stay with Brock. Here comes Moffat. Not over the dog leg. Oh, unbelievable. You have never seen that happen before, when a passing manoeuvre can happen right on the dog leg from Alan Moffat. Peter Brock would have to be demoralised. And a big blow up from someone down here. Yeah, someone pulled to the infield there, so he's been wise enough to get right off the track. And at the end of this race, undoubtedly, no matter who wins, major controversy is going to surround Oran Park this afternoon. because exclusively to the ABC, the Confederation of Australian Motorsport has just announced rule changes for all these cars to apply from August 1st, when the first round of the Australian Endurance Championship commences at Oran Park in the Oran 300. And it's good news, but for some of the drivers, mainly bad news. Firstly, Peter Brock has his bigger wheels. At the moment, he must drive on 10-inch rims. He says that it doesn't give him the opportunity to use the right sort of tyres, to put his power to the ground, to stay with Alan Moffat, and we're seeing that right now. Moffat has to stay with his current 10-inch wheels. Brock gets his 12s. So do the BMW, so does every other Commodore. So for that, Peter Brock should be happy. The Falcons, the Camaros, and the Jaguars all get the ability to use 12-inch wheels again, using a bag size of up to 16 inches. That takes into account the tyre on the rim as well. But for all practical purposes, the wheel size as well will be 12 inches. So all the bigger cars get their bigger wheels. Now for the individual cars. Dick Johnson gets half of what he asks for. He gets his new inlet manifold. He also asked for bigger valves. The bigger valves and the inlet manifold together would have given him an extra 30 horsepower. Dick Johnson can at least be happy about that, because he says that his straight line capabilities aren't as good as the Commodores, and he wants the extra power simply to be able to stay with the Commodores in the straight line. So for Dick Johnson, extra power. For the Nissan Bluebird Turbo, bad news. They go into the over 3 litre class and therefore sacrifice points. At the moment, George Fury, right there in car 55, is running in the under 3 litre class and picks up extra points in the Australian Touring Car Championship. He's now been reclassified because of his turbocharger as an outright contender. For the BMW 635 CSI, a return to motor racing, now allowed a 24-valve cylinder head. Peter Williamson will be happy because Toyota Celicas are also allowed that, and that means that in the James Hardy 1000, the Castrol 400, the endurance races this year, we'll see Jim Richards return to racing in the BMW, which should now be competitive. The news that Peter Brock and the Falcons have been dreading, and which Alan Moffat has been looking forward to. He gets 30 extra horsepower, his 13B engine replacing his current 12A engine, and that means that at Bathurst this year especially, the big race in Australian touring car racing, Alan Moffat has the engine which could well make him competitive, if not dominant, with the V8 cars. Now, the CAMs have also made a couple of other announcements. You may notice we have announced absolutely nothing about Peter Brock other than the fact he gets bigger wheels. He does not get his bigger brakes. He does not get his new his new aerodynamics. But CAMs say, despite what Peter has told us, that he didn't ask for them. He does have the ability to apply for a quarterly hearing of CAMs, which occurs in the middle of July. So he could still get his modifications for the major touring car races later this year. But the big announcement from CAMs, apart from those changes, is that they will be watching all the races closely, and should one car or another have an advantage more than CAMs reckons is fair from the new rules that have been allowed, CAMs will apply a weight limit immediately to that motor car to negate an unfair advantage. But undoubtedly, at the end of this race today, there will be major controversy in the pits, and Peter Brock will be one of those most upset. Back to the race. Alan Grice with George Fury right on his tail.
And Moffat has recorded a time of 1 minute 16 seconds, 2.4 seconds quicker than Dick Johnson's existing lap. Should I say 1.4 seconds quicker than Johnson's existing lap record. Gap from first to second is 1.6 seconds, second to third, 4.1.
There's Gary Wilmington in the XD Falcon, a car that he built up from a wreck 3 years ago and which is returning to its natural state at this stage, heading for the pits. And as we wait for the end of this race and the driver's comments, we spoke before the race started to John Large, the president of the Confederation of Australian Motorsport, who outlined the rule changes and the significance for CAMs.
Well, Well, no doubt there'll be some heated discussion and some philosophical discussions about these changes over the next few weeks and right through the year of motorsport. And the obvious question for you, John, is how do you feel they're going to affect the sport for Australia?
Well, Bob, no responsible legislator ever makes decisions involving changes without at least feeling some concern as to what the outcome of those changes might mean in practice. However, I'm very heartened by the fact that there's been an extremely extensive amount of research go into this. We've had a very wide range of expert opinion, and it's significant, I think, that our own experts are finding it very difficult to determine which car might emerge in what position of advantage from all of this. I think the initial reaction by most people will be that the Mazda has done very well. My personal view is that the BMW 635 may very well prove to be the sleeper. The Falcon has an opportunity to do some suspension work, and again, that's a car which one or two of the experts have said is probably going to do much better as a result of these changes. That'll be good because both the Falcon and the BMW have been midfielders for a while, and certainly if they come up to the front as well, that's only going to make a good scene that much better.
So the main reason behind it all was to bring the racing closer together.
Yes, certainly CAMS hasn't in any way set out to do anything that's going to alter the positions of finishers. It's our objective to just redress some of the imbalances that have worked themselves into the system over the last 2 or 3 years of this formula and bring the cars closer together, as I say, so that we can get a good scene and make it even better.
Well, it's certainly not bad at the moment, is it, as Alan Moffat leads Peter Brock, and then the fantastic dice between Alan Grice here and George Fury for third position, with Barry Jones in the Mazda breathing down both their necks. And look at Fury work in that little Nissan. You see, George Fury can win the Australian Touring Car Championship here today at Oran Park. If he wins this event, nothing Alan Moffat can do can beat him from here on in the Australian Touring Car Championship, and that's what George Fury wanted so desperately to do today. But when he blew the start, having to load up the turbocharger to get it to work, and he needs to actually flip the throttle, depress the clutch, get the turbo up to 7 grand, then go again and drop the clutch. And he blew it, and that's cost him another place now, as he's dropped back behind Barry Jones into 5th position.
Well, how did Jones squeeze through there to now set off after Alan Grice in 3rd position? Barry Jones, an expert at both Oran Park and Amaru Park, as they go past Laurie Nelson in the V6 Capri.
Fury has taken a gamble this weekend as well on tyres. He's running a very soft compound, softer than he's ever tried before. And that means that unless he's terribly smooth, the tyres can go off very quickly, and maybe that's what's happened right now.
This is the battle for 3rd and 4th, and that's 4th place there at the moment. Barry Jones in car 41. And long gone in the distance are Alan Moffat and Peter Brock, and that's 3rd place there, Alan Grice in the STP Roadways car. And poor Alan, who's had such a good start to the championship and then fallen in a bit of a hole in the middle, has now got the opportunity to try and pull himself back out again with some more valuable points, because this is the penultimate round of the Australian Touring Car Championship, the final coming up at Lakeside in Queensland. There's the leader, Moffat, Brock in 2nd position. The gaps between 1st and 2nd, 2.4 seconds. 2nd to 3rd, 4.4 seconds. And Fury's in trouble as they come up towards, should I say, Gibson. Gibson, car number 56, a little bit hard to pick the number from the distance as we watch Fury there behind Jones. So the man who was supposed to be running guard for, and one of the Camaro drivers also pointing in the wrong direction there.
That's
Mike Bergman.
That's Bergman spinning as Alan Moffat went through him. Bergman tried to get out of Moffat's way and instead got right into Peter Brock's way, claiming the apex of the corner, and good driving from Peter Brock to save himself in that situation as Fred Gibson heads for the pits in the first of the turbocharged Nissans, and that perhaps does not bode well for George Fury because the cars are supposed to be identical.
Coming up now to Lent in lap number 14, out 32. And the gap is increasing between 1st and 2nd, now 3.8 seconds. Naturally enough, Brock was balked on that occasion by Bergman in the Camaro. Grice, Jones and Fury. And Fury now without a teammate. News is that Greg Hansford has also worked through to 8th position in car number 31, so he's not offering too much to Alan Moffat at the moment either in car 43.
Hansford was off 11th grid position, so that gives an indication of the competitive nature of the field, that Greg can only get himself up to 8th position, picking up 3 places at this stage. Jones now all over Grice. What a good drive from Barry Jones. And Fury really tossing the Nissan around behind Jones.
Still stretching that gap. 4 seconds now, 4.04 seconds. Grice with Jones still ducking and weaving. He squeezed through on George Fury. And he might just upset things here at the 7th round. Jones hasn't been following the Touring Car Championship whilst Grice has been. See the positions, the top 3 positions after 15 laps out of 32. Moffat, Brock and Grice.
Moffat took over the lead in this race on lap 7. It's the earliest in any Australian Touring Car Championship so far this year that he's taken the lead. The previous time was at Wanneroo when he took the lead on lap 8, and then of course relinquished it later in the race when he took his demon pit stop for fuel. But Moffat this time is really going for it, taking the lead early and setting the pace.
And still stretching the gap to 4.5 seconds now. Second to third, 4.3 seconds. Moffat continues to get stronger. And Fury now the man who's starting to wiggle the tail of the Nissan Turbo Bluebird around a little. Inside rear wheel off the deck on that occasion through the left-hander.
And as Grice struggles to hold out Barry Jones, and indeed behind him, George Fury. We spoke to Grice earlier, and not a happy Grice earlier, about his chances in this event.
Alan Grice, a fairly quick time, a good performance from your point of view, no doubt.
Yes, we were happy with it. I thought a perfect lap in a Commodore would probably be worth about a 15.9, but that'd certainly stop it. So at a 16.4, we did about 3 of them in the 2 sessions. So we're pretty pleased with that time, pretty pleased with the consistency of that time. And the other thing that we've got a fairly long run here at Oran Park from the start line to the first corner. So that initial torque from the V8s may place Brock and I in a good position for the first corner.
What's going to happen once you are out the front?
That's car 3, Bergman in the Chevy Camaro. It looks like he's lost his front wheel. He was the man who spun earlier, almost at the same point, 1 corner back to get out of the way of Alan Moffat, and this time round he's put it on its roof.
And even broken the concrete barrier, so he's slammed into the fence.
Oh, look at that. The driver appears to be still in the motor car.
Leaders go through, that's Brock in second position.
Fire marshals in attendance. But they're going to need the rescue crew to get him out of there by the looks of it.
The roof is jammed, the doors are shut on the vehicle. Yellow flags being frantically waved as we go back to the leader, Alan Moffat in car 43 years of age from Melbourne. Touring car champion in 73, 6 and 7. Harrington back out there circulating again in car number 4 after replacing that rear wheel.
4.6 seconds the gap, Alan Moffat to Peter Brock. And 5.01 seconds back to third position, Alan Grice. Brock rounds up Grice's teammate, Harrington. There's Grice. Jones now coming out of the slipstream and going for the brakes. This is the sort of pressure that Alan Grice just doesn't need from someone who's not in major championship contention.
Grice, just barely from Barry Jones. Grice, who started here at Oran Park in 1964. First man to crack the 100-mile-an-hour lap at Mount Panorama. As the leaders go through, there's Harrington, who's a long way down in the standings. As
Here
Mike
comes Bergman.
Now being
He's getting out by himself, so that's good news for Mike Bergman. He's okay, but what a horrifying minute he would have spent inside that motor car. Nothing worse than being upside down in a motor car with petrol leaking and not knowing how you're going to get out. Flag marshals and the fire marshals quickly in attendance, and it's a credit to them.
One of the significant things of this so far has been, after all of the teams had planned to use their second drivers so carefully, Stephen Harrington, Greg Hansford, Fred Gibson, none of it's come to fruition. And it's this man here, Alan Moffat, who set the pace so very early, something that we haven't seen at the other rounds, as John pointed out before. And you know, one wonders just what's going to happen now with new touring car regulations when they get to the Endurance Championship, just what Alan Moffat is capable of with an engine that will produce something like an extra 30-odd brake horsepower.
Allegations have already been made against Alan Moffat that he's been foxing in earlier rounds, backing off, in the hope finally that people would recognise that he needed his 13B engine. Now he leads, and leads certainly not comfortably, because they're both under the lap record and both going as hard as they can, but he certainly leads by almost 5 seconds from Peter Brock.
I think it's been a marvellous achievement from Peter Brock as well, after having a pretty sour sort of a wake-up midway through the season to get the Commodore competitive. It was Alan Grice, in fact, there in shot, who was really starting to worry the Marlborough Hole and the other team, and they've got back out and they tested very hard at Calder, and they've brought the Commodore up to the absolute 100% limit. John Harvey, Larry Perkins, Peter Brock all saying that they can't get one more tenth out of that motor vehicle. Brocky says it's the best he's ever had it, and he just can't catch that Mazda. It's interesting, those two drivers with 3 touring car championships apiece and overseas credits to their name. They've got many, many state and national titles, and this season, 1983, could well be a decider between the two of them on paper, with Moffat just sneaking ahead now with the extra touring car championship. That's if he can get it.
Earlier, Bob Vincent spoke to Alan Moffat. Have that in the moment for you, as Alan Moffat now slams down the main straight, picking up 5th gear in the little Mazda. 960 kilograms it weighs, and in fact I put the hypothesis to the Confederation of Australian Motorsport shortly before before the start of the race, that would Moffat be capable of ballasting himself up to 1,200 kilograms, the minimum weight to allow him the bigger wheels and tyres? The answer was no, he's not allowed to. He can go over his minimum weight any time he likes, but the size of his rear rims will be judged on his minimum racing weight of 960 kilograms, so he may not have any more than the 10-inch rear rims. And now we've got the interview with Alan Moffat.
Alan Moffat, after a great practice session in the second session yesterday, are you reasonably confident?
Well, you can never be reasonably confident in this business, Bob. I'm happy with our warm-up run this morning. I'd love it to have been a little bit longer. I think one of these days some of the organizers of these races will understand how critical it is for us to have a few laps, and the overseas patterns set the trend, and everybody goes out for an hour on the Sunday morning and really gets themselves set up. I think under the circumstances, with the track being so messy, and by messy I mean sort of watery, damp and gritty, we were happy with our time yesterday, but it was rather novel running around with our lights on in the last qualifying session last night.
What about the Oran Park circuit? Is that going to change your tactics at all for this round?
My tactics will be the same as they were at Surfers Met. I will do my very best, and being on the front row, I'll try and get the lead. I would expect both the Holdens to pass me on about the first lap, or at least halfway through the second lap. And we've only got one objective today, and that's to beat the Datsun.
Moffat at the moment certainly doing that. He's beating the Datsun and the Commodore and every other vehicle in the race with 10 laps to go. Round 7 of the Touring Car Championship. Moffat faced with a fairly complex problem in the upcoming round of the Touring Car Championship, because he's had an offer from Mazda International to drive at the Le Mans 24-hour race. And it's going to be an interesting decision that Alan Moffat will make as to which way he should go, whether he should pursue the Touring Car Championship or go overseas and further enhance his reputation, as we watch Alan Grice and Barry Jones continuing their battle in 3rd and 4th. Gap between the drivers in 1st and 2nd position is now seeming to consolidate just a little, 4.85 seconds. Moffat either deciding that he's far enough in front, or Rock having found a second win. There's 2nd to 3rd, Grice.
Steve Harrington goes to the pits from his lowly position in the event.
Second time in there for him.
16th place or thereabouts. But the positions in the Australian Touring Car Championship after 23 laps of Oran Park. Alan Moffat, of course, first, and Peter Brock. Then comes Alan Grice, Barry Jones. Then comes George Fury, followed by car 59, not Terry Shield, it's
Peter McLeod.
Peter McLeod, yes, thank you. From car 15 is Terry Finnegan. Then comes Greg Hansford in position 8, followed by David Parsons in the Holden Commodore in 9th place. Kevin Bartlett is 10th in the big Chevy Camaro, having its first run in the Australian Touring Car Championship this year. There are the positions in the Australian Touring Car Championship. The uncorrected points position, which puts George Fury on 141 points. He has to drop one round. So far, his worst result in an Australian Touring Car Championship has been 4th. In fact, he has had 3 4th positions, so he can choose which one he wishes to drop. At the moment, he's lying 5th, so this will be the round he drops, in fact, if he does not increase his position in the next 8 laps.
Surprising just how far Fury is behind these two drivers, Grice and Jones, and particularly with the blistering time that he set so late yesterday afternoon as Peter McLeod goes back into the pits in the Slip 50 Mazda. Fury, in fact, in the last couple of laps with the headlights on in the Bluebird. It's McLeod in the fire-breathing peripheral port Mazda.
And actually, Neil, with the announcement that we've made about the new 13B engine for the Mazdas, it raises an interesting point. How many of the drivers are going to be able to afford to buy the new engine? In fact, what we may well be seeing from the Mazdas is a split in the camp, that there will be some very quick with the 13B, some closer, some slower rather, with the 12A, depending on the budgets that the teams have.
There's a suggestion in the pits yesterday, in fact, by a couple of the Mazda drivers, that they didn't want the bigger engine. They were quite happy with what they had.
Oh, and Grice using all the track and then some. Not shy to do a bit of curb bouncing as he tries to put some distance, any distance, between himself and Barry Jones.
Alan Grice in car number 6. As Moffat comes back up onto the main straight, behind Kevin Bartlett, the man who ran second here last year to Peter Brock after Moffat was disqualified for jumping the start. It's a downhill starting line at Oran Park, which makes it very, very difficult for drivers to control the car away from the line without actually jumping, and Alan Moffat would argue that.
Bartlett not keen to let him through either, but Moffat gives him little choice in the matter. Kevin Bartlett, one of those who will be disadvantaged by the new rules, even though he gets the 12-inch rear rims, which theoretically should help this most powerful car in the Australian Touring Car Series to put its power to the ground. Kevin was explaining that the larger the rear rims and tyres, the more stress it places on the driving components like the half shafts, and really it's no answer for Kevin at all.
So that's the gap between first and second, which has now come down just a little to 4.04 seconds, and is further reducing now to 3 seconds on our last stopwatch check. So Peter Brock perhaps really firing himself up now in the closing stages. Bartlett car 66, Brock car 05. Peter Brock heading for the United States this week to watch the Detroit Grand Prix, the next round of the World Formula One Championship. He's heading over there with John Harvey, back in time no doubt for the final round at Lakeside.
They get back on the Thursday before Lakeside, in fact, in plenty of time to get their car together for the event. One of the main reasons they're going overseas is to see John Bagshaw, the former sales director of General Motors in Australia, with the idea of opening a door in Germany to Opel to allow Peter to start to import the two-door Opel GT car. He says it is not for racing, purely for him to modify in his workshops and sell as a limited edition vehicle with his Brock special equipment underneath the two-door body. To which we reply,
Very interesting. Brock, in fact, has been very successful with his special vehicle division in producing the Group 3 SS Commodore.
George Fury has obviously lost his gamble today to win the Australian Touring Car Championship at Oran Park. He is 10 seconds behind Barry Jones, and undoubtedly his tyres are off.
Gap first to second, stretching again to 4.09 seconds. Little wisp of smoke from the front left of the Commodore as Brock locks up a brake.
Should the positions remain unchanged to the end, Fury will take 19 points for his 5th position, taking him to 160 points uncorrected in the championship. Moffat will move to 146 corrected points, only 14 behind. Or if you look at it another way, if you correct George Fury's points, Alan Moffat moves to a 5-point advantage in the series.
1977 and 1980 Australian Rally champion George Fury, as we go back to the leader Alan Moffat. A man who in the early stages of his motor racing career borrowed $4,500 from his father to continue to race, to come back from the States and back here to the shores of Australia. As we mentioned in yesterday's program, has gone into motor racing the hard way as a gopher in the pit for Sterling Moss at Sandown, and also did a lot of the runaround work for Team Lotus in the United States.
3 laps remaining.
And has had a fairly lean time in Australian motor racing in the last couple of years with Australian Sports Car Championship in I think 1980. But as far as touring cars go, it's been a long time between drinks for Alan Moffat, endurance champion of 1982, but he'd really love to give Mazda their first touring car victory. And he's continuing to try to consolidate that idea at the moment. Moffat, who so far in the series had a win at Calder in the first round, the You'll all recall they did not finish at Sandown in the second round, where when trying to get past Alan Grice, the back end of the Mazda was hopping and leaping all over the road, and he broke an axle, and that put him out of the running. Of course, he finished second at Symonds Plains. Another great battle between himself and Alan Grice. Monterey, of course, he picked up a win. Adelaide, he came second in a gap that was immeasurable to Peter Brock. First place at Surfers Paradise, and now shooting for a possible another win in the Australian Touring Car Championship, the 7th round at Oran Park. Put the car on pole position on 2 occasions this season, Adelaide and Surfers Paradise. And in the race, which we really expected to be a big carve up and lots of panel crashing, it's been the one round in the Touring Car Championship so far which has been fairly sedate. Moffat establishing a clear lead in the early stages, Brock in second position, Grice in third, fending Barry Jones in fourth. Brock, the 6 times winner of the James Hardy 1000 Round Australia Repco Trial winner. Done his fair share at the wheel of General Motors products over the years, and Tiranas and Commodores and Monaros.
One lap to go for Alan Moffat of the Oran Park long circuit, the Grand Prix circuit. 2.6 kilometres around. 5 seconds the gap back to Peter Brock.
Moffat, who on occasions has shared his drives with great names like Jackie Hicks at Mount Panorama at Bathurst, Brian Redmond for a win in the Sebring 12-hour, Derek Bell, Dieter Questa, and has to be regarded together with this man here, Peter Brock, as one of the world's top touring car drivers or sedan drivers. Every time our international counterparts come to Australia, they comment on the skill and the brilliance of these two men. Moffat, an intense and demanding racing driver, as he comes down now to BP Corner, or should I say through NGK, over the top of the rise.
And if it hadn't been for a momentary lapse at Sandown in Victoria earlier this year, when he locked up the rear end and tore it out of the motor car, Alan Moffat would have almost a perfect result in the Australian Touring Car Championship. There goes the checkered flag for Alan Moffat's 4th win this year in 7 rounds of the Australian Touring Car Championship. Peter Brock goes through in 2nd place. That's the 3rd second that Peter Brock has taken, adding to 1 win and a 9th position. But for Alan Moffat, 2 fourths and a 2nd. 1 did not finish in 7 rounds of the Australian Touring Car Championship.
And the gap at the finish line was 1.93 seconds between Moffat and Brock.
Well, Alan, if there was ever any doubts what's the fastest touring car around Australia, there shouldn't be after today.
Well, I have to say that chasing Peter around those opening laps did remind me a bit of what it was like in the old days with a V8, so I think we can honestly say now the Rotary has come of age, because to be able to win here certainly gives us a great deal of encouragement anywhere in Australia now.
Did you ever have any doubts once you got past Peter?
Yes, I did, because I crunched my gearbox up a couple of times. He's pretty quick with his changes, and I missed a couple while I was chasing him, and I was a little bit nervous about it, so I was a little bit easier on it after I got through.
Well, we have heard from Cams today that your 13B engine that you have requested has been approved. How do you feel about that? I know that's putting the medal on you right at the sudden moment, but how do you feel?
Oh, I think what has to be understood about that it's not that we just get something. Everybody has got something. We're going to see a new BMW. We're going to see a big modified Commodore. We're going to see a revamped Falcon, and I think it's the greatest decision that's ever been made, because it allows everyone in the field to go to Bathurst and have at least what we think is, arithmetically in a way, an even break. And I see Peter smiling over there now. I know right now over the next 3 months there are plenty of things you can do to a Commodore, and there was only one thing we could do to a Mazda, and that's put a little bit bigger engine in it.
Well, congratulations, Alan, and we'll see you at Lakeside for the final round.
Yes, I'm looking forward to that.
Congratulations. Well, before we go, I might just grab Peter Brock. Peter, could I have you over for a moment, mate?
Sure.
You got your back to the camera. You won't get any plugs that way. Congratulations, mate. You just couldn't catch him in the end.
No, I gave it everything last 10 or so laps and sort of sliding around a fair bit. It was going off the end of the straight, I thought, fairly well. A couple of places on the track I felt very happy with how the car was speeding along, but every time I caught him a couple of tenths, he'd sort of pull out a couple of tenths, so it was just there. But I still haven't caught up to you, Al. Anyway, it was a good race, and it was a fast race, and I got a great start, and I don't think I could have expected to do much better.